The research station on Kepler 442b hummed with activity as Dr. Sarachun made her final rounds before the night shift. The xenobiology lab buzzed with the soft whir of environmental controls, keeping various alien specimens in their optimal conditions. Sarah had been studying the native fauna for 8 months now, cataloging behaviors and biological markers that would help future colonization efforts. She paused at the observation tank containing 3 juvenile Kitharan predators. The locals called them shadow cubs for their ability to blend seamlessly with their surroundings. Each one was roughly the size of a large dog, covered in adaptive camouflage scales that shifted from deep purple to mottled gray, depending on their mood and environment. Their 6 legs ended in razor-sharp claws, and their elongated snouts housed rows of teeth designed for tearing flesh. The cubs had been orphaned when a construction crew accidentally destroyed their den. Rather than leave them to die, the research team had taken them in for study. They were supposed to be temporary residents, but finding a suitable release site had proven more challenging than expected. Sarah checked their feeding schedule on her tablet. The cubs had eaten 6 hours ago, consuming the processed protein bars that served as their primary nutrition. She made a note to request fresh meat for tomorrow's feeding. The artificial diet kept them healthy, but she noticed they seemed more alert and engaged when given actual prey items. A sharp beep from her tablet interrupted her thoughts. Emergency maintenance alert from the atmospheric processing unit. Sarah sighed and gathered her tools. These systems required constant attention on a world where the air contained trace amounts of methane that could corrode sensitive equipment over time. The processing unit sat in the station's lower level, accessible through a narrow maintenance corridor. Sarah had made this trip dozens of times before, usually finding nothing more serious than a clogged filter or loose connection. She descended the metal stairs, her footsteps echoing in the confined space. The corridor was dimly lit by emergency strips along the floor. Sarah activated her headlamp and began checking the primary intake valves. The atmosphere processor drew air from outside, filtered out harmful compounds, and redistributed clean oxygen throughout the facility. Without it, the small research team would have to rely on their emergency supply tanks, which held maybe 3 days of breathable air. She found the problem quickly. A seal had degraded around one of the primary filters, allowing unfiltered air to bypass the cleaning system. Sarah shut down the unit and began replacing the damaged component. The work required her to squeeze into a tight access panel, her arms stretched overhead as she manipulated the tools. 20 minutes later, she had the new seal in place and was testing the system when something sharp caught her forearm. A protruding piece of metal, probably loosened by vibrations from the processor, had opened a gash just below her elbow. Blood immediately began flowing down her arm. Sarah cursed under her breath and applied pressure to the wound. It wasn't deep, but it was bleeding freely. She needed to get to the medical bay for proper treatment. The research station's automated systems would handle the atmospheric processor now that the immediate problem was resolved. She climbed back up the stairs, leaving a few drops of blood on the metal steps. The medical bay was located near the main laboratory, which meant passing through the xenobiology section where the cubs were housed. Sarah moved quickly, still applying pressure to her arm with a makeshift bandage torn from her shirt. The laboratory was darker now, with most of the overhead lights dimmed for the night cycle. Only the essential specimen tanks maintained their full illumination. Sarah walked past the various enclosures, heading for the medical station on the far side of the room. She was halfway across when she heard it. A low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Sarah froze, her heart rate spiking. The sound was unlike anything she'd heard from the cubs before. It was deeper, more primal, carrying an undertone that made her instincts scream danger. Sarah turned toward the cub's enclosure and saw all 3 animals pressed against the transparent aluminum barrier. Their adaptive scales had shifted to a deep crimson color she'd never seen before. Their eyes, normally a pale yellow, now glowed with an intense orange light. But most disturbing was their posture. The cubs had arranged themselves in a perfect triangle formation, their bodies rigid with attention. One of the cubs, the largest of the three, slowly opened its mouth and made a sound that was barely above a whisper. The universal translator in Sarah's earpiece struggled to process the vocalization, producing static before finally rendering the words in English. "That's Apex." Sarah's blood turned to ice. The cubs could speak. More than that, they had recognized something in her scent that triggered an immediate and profound response. She remained perfectly still, afraid that any movement might provoke an attack. The cubs were contained behind a barrier designed to hold much larger creatures, but their reaction suggested they were experiencing something far beyond normal predatory interest. The middle cub made the same whispered statement, "Apex." Then the third one repeated it. Their voices carried a reverence that was unmistakably intelligent, not the simple mimicry of a trained animal. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. The cubs had never shown signs of advanced intelligence during months of observation. They played, ate, slept, and occasionally made simple vocalizations, but nothing approaching language. Yet now they were not only speaking, but using a term that suggested complex understanding of hierarchical concepts. More disturbing was their reaction to her blood. Human blood shouldn't smell like anything significant to an alien predator. Humans and Kithrans had evolved on completely different worlds with no shared evolutionary history. There was no reason for her blood to trigger such a specific response, unless there was something about human biology that the cubs recognized on an instinctual level. Sarah forced herself to move slowly toward the medical station. The cubs tracked her movement with their glowing eyes, but remained in their formation. Their scales continued to pulse with that deep red color, and their breathing had become synchronized. They were definitely communicating, though Sarah couldn't detect how. She reached the medical station and began treating her wound with shaking hands. The cut was clean and would heal quickly with the advanced medical gel, but the bleeding had been substantial. The metallic scent of human blood hung in the air, and Sarah realized it was this smell that had triggered the cub's reaction. As she worked, Sarah reviewed everything she knew about Kithran biology. The species was apex predators on their homeworld, sitting at the top of a complex food chain. They hunted cooperatively and showed high levels of intelligence, though previous contact had been limited. The cubs in the lab were the first Kithrans to be studied extensively by humans. But if they recognized human blood as belonging to an apex species, what did that mean? Humans had never been to the Kithran homeworld before the current expedition. There had been no opportunity for the species to interact or develop any kind of recognition pattern. Sarah finished bandaging her arm and turned back toward the cubs' enclosure. They had moved closer to the barrier, their snouts almost touching the transparent surface. The largest cub made another vocalization, this one longer and more complex. The translator worked for a moment before rendering the words. "Old scent, memory scent, pack leaders from the long hunt." Sarah felt her knees go weak. The cub was describing human blood in terms that suggested genetic memory, an inherited recognition passed down through generations. But that was impossible unless Kithrans had encountered humans before, which according to all official records had never happened. She activated her tablet and began recording everything she was observing. The cubs' behavior, their vocalizations, the precise nature of their physical reactions. This discovery would revolutionize understanding of both species and their potential shared history. The cubs remained at the barrier, watching her with those glowing eyes. Their scales had shifted again, now showing patterns of deep red shot through with streaks of gold. Sarah had never seen anything like it in her months of observation. These were clearly emotional or physiological responses to her presence, specifically to the scent of her blood. She needed to contact the research director immediately, but something held her back. The cubs' behavior suggested they were waiting for something, as if her presence had triggered some kind of protocol they were genetically programmed to follow. Sarah approached the enclosure slowly, her tablet held ready to record whatever happened next. The cubs remained motionless until she was within arm's reach of the barrier. Then, the largest one moved forward and placed its front paws against the transparent surface. When it spoke again, its voice was different, older somehow, carrying a weight of authority that seemed impossible from such a young creature. Apex returns. The compact holds. We remember the promise of the hunt bond. Sarah's tablet nearly slipped from her hands. The cub was speaking in complete sentences, using concepts that required abstract thinking and cultural memory. This wasn't just intelligence. It was evidence of a sophisticated society with traditions and agreements that somehow involved humans. The other two cubs moved to flank the speaker, their own voices joining in what sounded like a ritual chant. The translator struggled to keep up, producing fragments of meaning that hinted at something vast and significant. Blood of the first hunters. Scent of the pack that runs between stars. The old alliance awakens. Sarah backed away from the enclosure, her mind reeling. Whatever was happening here went far beyond a simple xenobiological study. The cubs weren't just recognizing her as a predator species. They were acknowledging some kind of ancient relationship between humans and Kithrans that had been lost to official history. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. The cubs' behavior suggested this recognition was just the beginning of something much larger. If Kithrans throughout the colony had the same genetic memory, her presence might trigger responses across the entire population. Sarah reached for her communicator to contact the research director, but the device crackled with static. The atmospheric disturbance that had damaged the processor was interfering with short-range communications. She would have to go to the main communications array to make contact with the outside. As she moved toward the exit, the cubs called out in unison, their voices carrying clearly across the laboratory. Apex goes to gather the pack. We will wait. The hunt begins again. Sarah ran. She burst through the laboratory doors and sprinted down the corridor toward the communications center. Her bandaged arm throbbed with each step, but adrenaline kept her moving. Behind her, she could hear the cubs making more vocalizations, their voices rising and falling in complex patterns that sounded disturbingly like a song. The communications center occupied a small room on the station's upper level. Sarah activated the long-range transmitter and began trying to reach Director Martinez at the main colony base. The signal took several seconds to connect, fighting through the atmospheric interference that plagued this region of the planet. When Martinez's face finally appeared on the screen, Sarah could see he was in the middle of dinner. His expression shifted from mild annoyance to concern when he saw her appearance. "Sarah, what's your status? You look like you've seen a ghost." Sarah took a deep breath and tried to organize her thoughts. How could she explain what she'd witnessed without sounding like she'd suffered some kind of breakdown? "Director, I need to report a critical development with the Kithran specimens. They've exhibited complex language capabilities and appear to have genetic memory relating to human contact." Martinez set down his fork and leaned closer to the screen. "Slow down. What exactly happened?" Sarah quickly described the incident, from her injury to the cubs' reactions and vocalizations. She transmitted the recordings from her tablet, watching Martinez's expression grow more serious as he reviewed the data. "This is unprecedented," Martinez said after reviewing the files. "If these creatures have inherited memories of human contact, it suggests a much longer history than we've been aware of." "That's what I'm thinking," Sarah agreed. "But how is that possible? According to all our records, humans have never been to this system before the current expedition." Martinez was quiet for a moment, his face thoughtful. "There are gaps in our historical records, particularly from the early expansion period. Some colonies were established and lost without leaving complete documentation. It's possible that humans reached this system decades or even centuries ago." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. If humans had been here before, what had happened to them? Had they established some kind of relationship with the Kithrans before disappearing? And if so, what do the cubs mean by the compact and the hunt bond? "Director, there's something else," Sarah said. The cubs referred to waiting for something, as if my presence triggered some kind of protocol. They mentioned gathering a pack and beginning a hunt. I think we may be dealing with more than just genetic memory. Martinez nodded grimly. I'm dispatching a full research team to your location. In the meantime, maintain observation of the specimens, but keep your distance. If they're responding to human biochemistry in ways we don't understand, we need to proceed with extreme caution. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah alone in the communications center. Through the station's windows, she could see the alien landscape of Kepler 442b stretching toward the horizon. 2 moons hung in the purple sky, casting strange shadows across the crystalline formations that covered much of the planet's surface. Somewhere out there, other Kithrans lived in their natural habitat. If the cubs' reaction was any indication, those wild populations might also carry genetic memories of human contact. Sarah's presence on the planet could be sending ripples through the entire ecosystem, awakening instincts and protocols that had been dormant for generations. She returned to her quarters and tried to rest, but sleep proved impossible. Every sound from the laboratory below seemed magnified, and she found herself straining to hear any vocalizations from the cubs. The station's automated systems hummed around her, maintaining the artificial environment that kept her alive on this alien world. Hours passed before Sarah finally admitted that rest wasn't coming. She dressed and made her way back to the laboratory, drawn by a need to understand what was happening with the cubs. The night shift technician, Rodriguez, was monitoring the specimens from his station near the entrance. Any unusual activity? Sarah asked. Rodriguez looked up from his displays, confusion evident on his face. That's just it, Dr. Chun. They've been completely silent since you left. No movement, no vocalizations, nothing. They're just sitting in that triangle formation, staring at the entrance like they're waiting for something. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She approached the cubs' enclosure slowly, noting that their scales had shifted to a deep blue color she'd never seen before. Their eyes had returned to normal, but their posture remained rigid with attention. As soon as Sarah came into view, all 3 cubs turned to face her. The largest one rose to its feet and approached the barrier, its expression somehow conveying both respect and expectation. When it spoke, its voice was calm and measured, carrying none of the excitement from their earlier encounter. Apex has spoken to the distant pack. The call has been sent. We will prepare for the gathering. Sarah's blood ran cold. The cubs somehow knew she had contacted the colony base. They understood that more humans would be coming, and they were treating it as part of some predetermined plan. Rodriguez moved closer, his eyes wide with shock. Did that thing just respond to what you did earlier? How could it possibly know about your communication? Sarah didn't have an answer. The cub's behavior suggested an intelligence and awareness that went far beyond what any previous studies had indicated. They weren't just remembering ancient contact with humans. They were actively participating in some kind of protocol that spanned generations. The largest cub moved closer to the barrier and placed its paw against the transparent surface. When it spoke again, its words carried a weight of absolute certainty. The first compact was broken by time and distance. The second compact begins now. Apex has returned to honor the ancient hunt bond. We will run together again among the stars. The research team arrived at dawn, their transport ship landing on the designated pad behind the station with a thunderous roar. Dr. Sarah Chan watched from the observation deck as Director Martinez disembarked along with 6 other specialists, their equipment cases suggesting they intended to conduct extensive testing. Sarah had spent the remainder of the night documenting everything she could remember about the cubs' behavior, cross-referencing their vocalizations with the Universal Translator's linguistic database. The results were disturbing. The cubs weren't just speaking. They were using grammatical structures and vocabulary that suggested their language had been influenced by human contact over extended periods. Martinez strode into the laboratory an hour later, his expression grave. Behind him came Dr. Elena Vasquez, the expedition's lead xenolinguist, and Dr. James Park, whose specialty in comparative evolutionary biology had made him invaluable during first contact scenarios. "Show us everything," Martinez said without preamble. Sarah led them to the cubs' enclosure, where the three young Kithrans remained in their triangle formation. Their scales had shifted again overnight, now displaying complex patterns of silver and blue that seemed to flow like water across their bodies. When they saw the new humans, all three cubs rose to their feet simultaneously. The largest cub approached the barrier and fixed its gaze on Martinez. When it spoke, its voice carried a formality that made Sarah's skin crawl. "Pack leader arrives. The apex brings truth speakers and memory keepers. We greet the hunters of the distant pack with honor." Dr. Vasquez nearly dropped her recording equipment. Her experience with alien languages was extensive, but she'd never encountered syntax this sophisticated from creatures that were supposedly prelinguistic. "The grammatical complexity is unprecedented," she whispered. "They're using formal address protocols that suggest a highly stratified society. This isn't learned behavior, it's cultural inheritance." Martinez stepped closer to the enclosure. "I am Director Martinez of the Human Colonial Expedition. What do you know about previous human contact with your species?" The cubs exchanged glances, a behavior Sarah hadn't observed before. They were definitely communicating through means beyond vocalization, possibly through scent markers or subtle body language cues that humans couldn't detect. The largest cub answered with careful precision. "The first compact was made in the time of our great sires' great sires. Humans came from the star void seeking new hunting grounds. Our pack leaders met with their pack leaders. Terms were agreed. The hunt bond was sealed with shared blood and shared prey." Dr. Park moved to Sarah's side, his tablet already recording physiological data from the cubs. "Their brain activity patterns are off the charts," he murmured. "These readings suggest cognitive development comparable to adult humans, not juvenile predators." Sarah felt her understanding of the situation shifting again. "What was the nature of this compact?" she asked. The second cub spoke for the first time since the previous evening. "Humans would hunt the far territories. Kithrans would hunt the home territories. When the great hunt came, both packs would run together against the void hunters that consume worlds." A collective silence fell over the research team. The cubs were describing an alliance, possibly a military alliance, between humans and an alien species that had been forgotten by human historical records. Martinez found his voice first. "What are void hunters?" The third cub answered, its young voice carrying an ancient dread. "The devourers that come between stars. The pack killers that turn worlds to stone." The first compact was made to prepare for their return, but humans departed before the preparation was complete. Dr. Vasquez was frantically working with her linguistic analysis software. The temporal markers in their language suggest this contact occurred at least 2 to 3 centuries ago. The linguistic drift patterns indicate isolated developments since then, but with maintained cultural memory of the original interaction. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. If humans had established contact with the Kithrans centuries ago, it would have been during the early expansion period when record-keeping was inconsistent and many expeditions simply vanished without trace. What happened to the humans who made this compact? Martinez asked. The largest cubs' scales darkened perceptibly. The star sickness took them. Their ship pack became weak, then silent. We waited many generations for their return. The compact was never formally ended. Dr. Park looked up from his readings, his face pale. Star sickness could be referring to any number of colonial-era diseases. Radiation exposure, viral infections adapted to alien environments, genetic degradation from extended space travel. Early colonists faced mortality rates approaching 70%. The weight of realization settled over the team. Humans had been here before, had established diplomatic relations with an intelligent alien species, and had died out before completing whatever agreement they'd made. The Kithrans had been waiting for centuries for humans to return and honor their commitments. Martinez activated his communicator and opened a channel to the main colonial base. "Command, this is Research Team Delta. We need immediate consultation with the Colonial Archives and the Xenopolitical Council. We may be dealing with inherited treaty obligations. While Martinez coordinated with command, Dr. Vasquez continued her interview with the Cubs. What was your understanding of human capabilities when the first compact was made? The Cubs conferred among themselves through their silent communication method before the largest one answered. Humans were pack hunters of great cunning. They possessed fire weapons that could pierce the void between stars. Their young learned war songs that contained knowledge of fighting the Devourers. They promised to share these songs in exchange for our knowledge of the deep hunts. Sarah felt pieces clicking into place. The Cubs weren't just describing a trade agreement. They were describing a military alliance focused on fighting some kind of threat that existed between star systems. Early human colonists might have possessed weapons technology or tactical knowledge that the Kithrans found valuable. Dr. Park's equipment detected a sudden spike in neural activity from the Cubs. Something's happening, he warned. All three specimens are showing synchronized brain wave patterns. The Cubs moved to the center of their enclosure and formed a tight circle. When they began vocalizing, it was in perfect harmony, their voices blending into complex harmonic structures that the universal translator couldn't parse. Dr. Vasquez worked frantically with her equipment. It's not language in any conventional sense. The harmonic frequencies suggest they're transmitting information through sonic resonance. The patterns are too complex to be accidental. The harmonic singing continued for several minutes before gradually fading. When the Cubs separated, their scales had shifted to a deep gold color that pulsed with inner light. The largest cub approached the barrier again, and when it spoke, its voice carried new authority. The deep pack has been contacted. The adult hunters know that Apex has returned. They come to judge whether the second compact can be made. Martinez ended his communication with command and turned back to the group. How long before these adult hunters arrive? The cub tilted its head, considering. 3 sun cycles. Maybe 2 if the winds favor swift travel. Sarah felt her heart rate spike. That means we have less than 3 days before the entire regional Kithran population converges on this location. Dr. Park's readings showed elevated stress responses from all 3 cubs. They're anticipating something significant. Their physiological indicators suggest preparation for a major event. Martinez gathered his team for a quick conference away from the enclosure. Command is sending the full diplomatic corps along with military advisors. If we're dealing with treaty obligations, we need to be prepared for formal negotiations. What if they expect us to honor agreements made by colonists who died centuries ago? Sarah asked. We don't even know what promises were made. Dr. Vasquez consulted her translation matrices. Based on the linguistic evidence, the original compact involved mutual defense against an external threat. The void hunters they mentioned could be anything from spaceborne predators to hostile alien civilizations. Or it could be metaphorical, Dr. Park suggested. Primitive cultures often describe natural phenomena in supernatural terms. These void hunters might represent asteroid impacts, stellar radiation events, or other cosmic hazards. The largest cub's voice carried clearly across the laboratory, interrupting their discussion. Apex speaks in hushed tones of doubt. The compact cannot be made with uncertain hearts. If humans have forgotten the void hunters, the deep pack will need to provide reminders. Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. The cubs could apparently understand human speech well enough to follow their conversation, and their response suggested that doubt or hesitation might have serious consequences. She approached the enclosure alone, leaving the others to continue their discussion. What kind of reminders? The cub studied her for a long moment before answering. Memory songs, vision dreams, the knowing of what comes between the stars to devour the light of worlds. Before Sarah could ask for clarification, the cubs began their harmonic singing again. But this time, the sound seemed to penetrate her mind directly, bypassing her ears and resonating within her skull. Images flashed through her consciousness. Vast shapes moving through the void between stars, worlds stripped of atmosphere and left as lifeless husks, civilizations reduced to ruins in a matter of hours. The visions carried an emotional weight that spoke of genuine terror, of species-wide trauma passed down through genetic memory. Sarah staggered backward as the harmonic song ended, her mind reeling from what she'd experienced. The other team members rushed to steady her, their voices sounding distant and unclear. "What happened?" Martinez demanded. "Your vital signs spiked for nearly 3 minutes." Sarah struggled to find words for what she'd witnessed. They shared memories. Visual memories of something that attacks entire planets. It wasn't metaphorical. It was historical record. Dr. Vasquez studied her recordings of the harmonic frequencies. The sonic patterns show complex modulation that could theoretically affect human neural pathways. If they can transmit information directly to the brain, their communication capabilities far exceed what we've assumed. Dr. Park's equipment showed the Cubs returning to their normal physiological baselines. Whatever they just did required significant energy expenditure. Their metabolic rate spiked during the transmission. The largest Cub approached the barrier again, its expression somehow conveying concern. Apex understands now. The Void Hunters are real. The threat continues. Will a second compact be considered? Martinez stepped forward, his diplomatic training taking over. "We will consider all information provided, but human decision-making requires consultation with our leadership and careful evaluation of obligations." The Cub scales shifted to a pattern Sarah hadn't seen before, deep blue streaked with silver. Understanding is given. The Deep Pack will wait for human choice. But choice must be made before the Void Hunters return to this region of the Star Void. "When do you expect their return?" Martinez asked. The Cubs conferred silently before answering in unison, "Soon." Over the following hours, the research team worked frantically to document everything they could learn from the Cubs. Dr. Vasquez made significant progress in understanding their communication methods, discovering that the Kitherans used multiple channels of information transmission, including vocalizations, scent markers, and sonic resonance. Dr. Park's biological studies revealed even more disturbing findings. The Cubs showed genetic markers indicating accelerated maturation triggered by external stimuli. Their encounter with human blood had activated dormant genetic sequences, forcing them to develop adult cognitive capabilities in a matter of hours. Sarah coordinated with the expanding research effort while struggling to process her own experience with the memory vision. The images the Cubs had shared felt more real than her own memories, carrying emotional content that suggested they were genuine historical records rather than constructed fantasies. As the first day drew to a close, long-range sensors began detecting movement in the wilderness surrounding the research station. Groups of large creatures were converging from multiple directions, their movement patterns suggesting coordinated migration rather than random animal behavior. "The adult Kitherans are coming," Sarah announced to the team, "and they're bringing a lot of backup." Martinez reviewed the sensor data with growing concern. Command estimates at least 50 individual creatures approaching from 6 different directions. If they're all as intelligent as these Cubs, we're about to face the largest first contact scenario in human history. The Cubs had remained quiet during the afternoon, apparently conserving energy for whatever was to come. As evening approached, they resumed their triangle formation, but this time faced toward the outside walls of the station. When the largest Cub spoke again, its voice carried anticipation mixed with ancient sadness. "The Deep Pack runs swift. They carry the weight of broken promises and failed compacts. Apex must choose: honor the blood bond of the first compact, or face the Void Hunters alone when they return." Sarah looked out at the alien landscape where dozens of powerful predators were approaching under cover of darkness. In less than 48 hours, she would need to help her species make a decision that could determine humanity's survival against a threat they didn't yet understand. The Cubs began their harmonic singing again, but this time their song carried across the landscape through frequencies that penetrated the station's walls. In the distance, other voices began answering the call, creating a symphony of sound that spoke of reunion, judgment, and the awakening of ancient promises. Sarah closed her eyes and listened to the alien song, knowing that everything that came next would reshape humanity's understanding of its place among the stars. Dr. Sarah Chan stood on the observation platform as dawn broke over Kepler 442b, revealing a sight that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The landscape around the research station had been transformed overnight into a gathering ground for what appeared to be every adult Kytherin within 1,000 kilometers. Massive predators, each easily twice the size of the cubs, had arranged themselves in precise formations radiating outward from the station. Their scales displayed complex patterns of silver, gold, and deep blue that shifted and flowed in response to some invisible communication network. Conservative estimates put their numbers at over 300 individuals. Command wants a full diplomatic briefing in 1 hour, Director Martinez announced as he joined Sarah on the platform. The Colonial Council is treating this as a potential first contact scenario with species-wide implications. Sarah nodded, her attention focused on the largest Kytherin she could see, a magnificent creature that stood nearly 3 meters tall at the shoulder. Its scales showed patterns more intricate than anything the cubs had displayed, suggesting either advanced age or high social status. That one's been watching the station all night, she observed. No movement, no communication with the others, just constant observation. Dr. Vasquez emerged from the communications center, her face pale with exhaustion. I've been monitoring their harmonic transmissions all night. The complexity is beyond anything we've encountered. They're not just communicating. They're conducting what appears to be a formal legal proceeding. Dr. Park appeared with his portable scanning equipment, his readings showing elevated stress indicators across the entire Kytherin gathering. Something's building toward a climax. Their collective neural activity has been increasing steadily for the past 6 hours. Inside the laboratory, the 3 cubs remained in their triangle formation, but their behavior had changed dramatically. They sat with perfect stillness, their scales locked in patterns of gold and silver that hadn't shifted since the adult Kytherins had arrived. When the largest cub spoke, its voice carried a formality that made it sound far older than its apparent age. The Deep Pack has completed their deliberation. Apex will be called to answer for the broken compact and to speak for the human pack's intentions. Martinez gathered his diplomatic team around him. The full Colonial Council had sent negotiators along with military advisors, but everyone understood that the situation had moved beyond standard first contact protocols. Remember, Martinez addressed the group. We're potentially dealing with inherited treaty obligations from colonial expeditions that may predate our current governmental structure. Whatever was promised centuries ago, we need to understand what they expect from us now. Sarah found herself designated as primary contact, her initial interaction with the cubs giving her unique insight into their communication patterns. As the team prepared to meet with the adult Kytherins, she reviewed everything she'd learned about their social structure and historical memory. The cubs had described a species-wide response to external threats, suggesting that individual Kytherin communities maintained contact across vast distances. Their ability to transmit complex information through harmonic frequencies indicated a communication network that could span continents. More importantly, their genetic memory of human contact suggested that Kytherins viewed agreements as binding across generations. The promises made by long-dead colonists were still considered valid contracts requiring fulfillment. The human delegation exited the research station through the main airlock, their environmental suits providing protection against the planet's trace atmospheric toxins. The Kytherin gathering parted to create a clear pathway toward the largest individual, the one Sarah had been observing from the platform. As they approached, Sarah could see details that made her appreciate the true magnificence of these creatures. The adult Kytherins showed physical adaptations that went far beyond the cubs' basic camouflage abilities. Their scales weren't just changing color. They were actively manipulating light and shadow to create visual effects that bordered on the impossible. The largest Kytherin rose to its full height as the humans approached, its head reaching nearly 4 meters above the ground. When it spoke, Its voice resonated through both audible frequencies and subsonic vibrations that Sarah could feel in her bones. I'm First Hunter Carathan of the Western Reaches, speaker for the Deep Pack in matters of ancient compacts and star void treaties. You are the apex whose blood awakened the memory songs in our young ones. Sarah stepped forward, her universal translator working overtime to process the complex vocalizations. I am Dr. Sarah Chun, representative of the current human colonial expedition. We seek understanding of the agreements made by previous human visitors to your world. Carathan scales shifted to display patterns that somehow conveyed both respect and deep sadness. The first compact was sealed with blood oath and hunt bond 307 of your solar years past. Humans promised to share Void Hunter combat knowledge in exchange for Deep Pack support during the Great Convergence. Dr. Vasquez stepped closer to Sarah, her equipment recording every nuance of the exchange. Can you describe the nature of this convergence? The massive Kithran's expression became grim. Every 400 of your years, the Void Hunters return to this stellar region. They consume the light of stars and strip worlds of life essence. The first compact was made to prepare joint resistance when the convergence began. Martinez moved forward. And when is this convergence expected to occur? Carathan scales displayed patterns that pulsed with ominous rhythm. Within 6 of your solar years, perhaps less. The Deep Pack astronomers track the Void Hunter approach vectors. They come from a space between galaxies, following orbital patterns that span cosmic ages. Sarah felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on her shoulders. The Kithrans weren't just asking humans to honor an ancient agreement. They were requesting military assistance against a threat that could destroy entire solar systems. What combat knowledge did the original humans promise to share? She asked. Carathan gestured toward a smaller Kithran that approached carrying what appeared to be carved stone tablets. The war songs were partially recorded before the star sickness claimed the human pack. Incomplete knowledge that must be restored for the compact to hold power. The stone tablets showed primitive but recognizable star charts along with tactical diagrams that looked disturbingly familiar. Sarah realized she was looking at early human military doctrine, specifically combat strategies designed for space-based warfare. Dr. Park studied the tablets with growing amazement. These diagrams show formation fighting techniques and fleet coordination patterns. The humans who were here before weren't just colonists. They were military strategists preparing for large-scale space combat. Carathan's attention focused on Park with laser intensity. The human military keeper recognizes the war songs. Can the knowledge be restored? Before Park could answer, alarms began sounding from the research station. Emergency broadcasts crackled over the communication system as long-range sensors detected massive objects moving through the outer solar system. Sarah's blood turned to ice as she listened to the reports. Multiple contacts, each larger than anything in human experience, approaching at velocities that defied conventional understanding of space travel. The Void Hunters had arrived ahead of schedule. Carathan's scales erupted in patterns of brilliant red and gold as the Kithran gathering responded to the sensor alerts. Their harmonic communications filled the air with complex frequencies that spoke of ancient protocols activating across the entire planet. The convergence begins early, Carathan announced. The Void Hunters have changed their pattern. The Deep Pack must choose: fight alone with incomplete preparation, or trust that humans will honor the compact despite centuries of absence. Martinez opened his communicator and contacted the colonial fleet directly. Command, this is Research Team Delta requesting immediate military consultation. We have confirmed hostile contacts in system and potential alien allies requesting military cooperation. The response came back within minutes. Research Team Delta, this is Admiral Thompson aboard the CNS Resolute. We're tracking the incoming contacts and moving to intercept. What's the status of potential alien cooperation? Sarah looked at Carathan, seeing intelligence and determination in those alien eyes that matched anything she'd encountered among humans. Admiral, the Kithrans are offering military alliance against the incoming threat. They have centuries of combat experience against these void hunters and detailed knowledge of their capabilities. Carathan stepped closer to the human delegation. If the second compact is to be sealed, it must be done now. The void hunters will reach the inner system within 2 planetary rotations. There is no time for lengthy deliberation. Dr. Vasquez worked frantically with her translation equipment as Carathan began vocalizing in frequencies that bypassed human hearing entirely. Around them, the Kithran gathering responded with harmonic resonance that seemed to shake the ground itself. They're transmitting tactical data directly to their global communication network, she announced. Every Kithran on the planet is receiving real-time intelligence about the incoming threat. Overhead, the first human warships began appearing in the sky as the colonial fleet moved to orbital defense positions. Sarah watched the sleek vessels deploying in formation patterns that looked remarkably similar to the tactical diagrams on Carathan's stone tablets. The ancient war songs hold true knowledge, Carathan observed. Human military doctrine matches deep-pack combat understanding. The compact was made with wisdom. Admiral Thompson's voice crackled over the communication system. Research Team Delta, we need immediate consultation with your alien contacts. Our sensor readings show the incoming hostiles using technology that violates known physics. We're going to need every advantage we can get. Sarah activated her translation interface and addressed Carathan directly. Our military leader requests tactical cooperation. Can you share combat data with our fleet? Carathan's response came not in words, but in action. The massive Kithran raised its head toward the sky and began a harmonic transmission that resonated through frequencies spanning the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Within moments, the colonial fleet's communication arrays were receiving data streams of incredible complexity. Dr. Park monitored the data exchange with growing excitement. They're transmitting 3-dimensional tactical models, weapon effectiveness ratings, and mobility predictions for the incoming hostiles. This is information that would take our computers years to calculate. Above them, the colonial fleet began implementing formation changes based on the Kithran tactical data. Human warships moved into patterns that maximize their defensive capabilities while preparing strike formations optimized for the Void Hunters' known weaknesses. The first signs of incoming hostiles appeared as distortions in the planet's upper atmosphere. Massive shapes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, moving with purpose and intelligence that spoke of directed aggression. Carathan's scales displayed patterns of battle readiness that transformed the magnificent predator into something even more impressive, a warrior preparing to defend its homeworld. Void Hunters begin atmospheric entry. Deep Pack response protocols activate now. Across the landscape, adult Kithrans began moving with coordinated precision that demonstrated their true nature as apex predators. They weren't just intelligent. They were a military force that had been preparing for this confrontation for centuries. Sarah opened a channel to Admiral Thompson. Admiral, our allies are beginning ground-based defense operations. They've been preparing for this threat for hundreds of years. Thompson's response carried grim determination. Copy that, Research Team Delta. We're coordinating joint operations based on alien tactical data. First contact appears to be imminent. The Void Hunters descended through the atmosphere like living shadows, their forms defying easy description. They seem to exist partially outside normal space-time, their edges shifting and flowing in ways that hurt to observe directly. But the Kithrans were ready. As the first Void Hunter reached the planet's surface, every adult Kithran in the gathering opened fire with energy weapons that Sarah hadn't known they possessed. Brilliant beams of coherent light lanced skyward, striking the alien invader with coordinated precision. The Void Hunter reeled under the assault, its impossible form beginning to destabilize. In space above, human warships added their firepower to the attack, their weapons guided by Kithrin tactical data that predicted the creature's movement patterns with uncanny accuracy. "It's working," Dr. Park announced in amazement. "The combined human-Kithrin attack is actually affecting these things." Karathin moved to stand beside Sarah as the battle raged overhead. "The second compact is sealed with shared combat against the ancient enemy. Humans and Kithrins hunt together among the stars once more." Sarah watched as more Void Hunters descended toward the planet's surface, met by the combined firepower of two species that had found common cause in the face of extinction. Human tactical innovation merged with Kithrin instinctive understanding of the enemy's nature, creating a defense that neither species could have managed alone. "Admiral Thompson," Sarah transmitted, "the alliance is confirmed. Kithrins and humans are fighting together against the Void Hunters. Recommend full integration of tactical operations." Thompson's response carried a note of fierce satisfaction. "Roger that, Research Team Delta. Joint operations are proving highly effective. We're actually pushing these things back." As the battle continued, Sarah realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in human history: the birth of an interstellar alliance forged in the crucible of mutual survival. The cubs in the laboratory had awakened something far more significant than genetic memory. They had triggered the formation of a partnership that would reshape humanity's future among the stars. Karathin's harmonic transmissions coordinated ground-based defenses, while human fleet formations adapted their strategies in real time. The Void Hunters, for all their terrifying capabilities, found themselves facing a resistance they hadn't encountered in previous convergences. The first compact was broken by death and distance. Karathin observed as another Void Hunter fell to combine human-Kithrin firepower. The second compact is sealed by battle and blood. This alliance will endure across the centuries until the Void Hunters are driven back to the space between galaxies. Sarah smiled as she watched human and Kitharian forces working in perfect coordination to defend their shared star system. The cubs had been right all along. Apex predators were meant to hunt together. The convergence continued for 3 days, but the outcome was never in doubt once human tactical innovation merged with Kithrin combat experience. The Void Hunters retreated beyond the outer solar system, their 400-year cycle of destruction finally broken by the alliance of two species that had found strength in unity. In the aftermath, as repair operations began and casualty reports were compiled, Sarah returned to the laboratory to check on the 3 cubs that had started everything. She found them still in their triangle formation, but their scales now displayed patterns of gold and silver that pulsed with contentment. "The second compact holds," the largest cub announced. "Apex and Deepak hunt together once more. The young ones will learn the war songs of both species. The Void Hunters will find no easy prey in this region of the Star Void." Sarah knelt beside the enclosure, her own wounds from the incident that had triggered everything now completely healed. "What happens now?" The cub's response carried the wisdom of ancient traditions and the promise of a bright future. "Now the real hunt begins. Humans and Kithrins will take the war to the Void Hunters' home territories. The space between galaxies will no longer be safe for those who devour worlds." Sarah looked out at the alien landscape where human and Kithrin forces were establishing joint command centers, knowing that she had witnessed the beginning of something that would echo through the centuries. The cubs had smelled her blood and recognized apex predators. They had been absolutely right.